I'd like to kick us off, and as is our custom, we look around and take roll. And I see everybody but Kelly. So noted, and sometimes she comes in a minute late, so we'll not make that final until it's final.
Give a seat where for.
But tonight, the first thing that we're going to do is call for public comment. I see members of the public here tonight. We're all members of the public. So, if you would like to step up to the microphone and introduce yourself, you have 3 minutes to share your opinion or point of view with us. And Robin, if you'd like to start.
Hi, I'm Robin Bernstein, and I live at Littleton Crossing. And I ordered this book from the library. It's the University of Colorado Springs on street design. So most of my notes are from there. So it talks a lot about pedestrians. So this is what I put. A pedestrian is a walker. Any person on foot. Street planning and design need to involve the pedestrian for safety. Successful shopping sections are because of pedestrians. They're actually the lifeblood of the retail stores. So safety is required. A healthy street is walkable and supported for pedestrians, bikers, and RTD. Skinny streets are safe and use land more efficiently. So they suggested that an alley 10 miles per hour, a street 20 miles, and Main Street 15 to 25. Sidewalks. More pedestrians remind cars that sidewalks and crossing streets are for people. Pedestrian accidents are related to lack of adequate sidewalks, forcing them to share pavement with the devil wagon. Streets and sidewalks need bright lights for visibility and crime prevention. Distracted driving. Lower speeds for the car, devil wagon as I call it, result in increased opportunity to see and react to danger, which is resulting in distraction. The driver's distracted. Lower speeds, not higher speeds, reduce crashes. Designers must create streets with lower speeds for the car. Police cannot correct speeding without engineering help. When 85% of the public is speeding, the road design says it's okay to go fast. The driver needs awareness at that point. Wrong, it's not okay. Slow down. Mary Carter Greenway. A trail's purpose provides a non-motorized access throughout neighborhoods. It's a connecting link. So my opinion is no e-bikes on that trail. And they're too fast, too dangerous for pedestrians. All bikes need to slow down and enjoy the ride.
Thank you, Robin.
Sure.
Would you like to? Saving the best for last, Pam. So.
Right. I don't want to go after her. You know. All right. I'm Casey Gibson from District 3, which I think about from last meeting, near Cornerstone Park. Safer Streets is on the agenda today, so I wanted to start out with some appreciation. I know sometimes we come up here and complain. So personally, the pilot projects are making a difference. When I'm biking, I see how drivers slow down in the narrow bulb outs. When I'm on foot, I feel more protected. When I cross the intersection, I feel like there's a place for me as a pedestrian for people to see me. So I want to just say I appreciate that, all the work that's going on, it's ongoing, so pats on the back. I'm looking forward to all the new stuff that's coming, and there's lots of new stuff coming. Infrastructure, enforcement, and education are the core values for Safer Streets. And as these projects roll out, I'm kind of seeing how important infrastructure is because it's there 24/7. I'm not really seeing the enforcement going on, which I don't cruise the entire city, so maybe I'm missing it. But it doesn't feel like anyone is being enforced. Like people fly up and down all my neighborhood streets.
Is that mostly Windermere that you're talking about, or?
I'm talking all the streets around Windermere. I live on Datura, so this morning I was walking back from coffee, and someone flew past me on Powers. So I don't know how much more emphasis can be placed on enforcement. Like the blinking lights, people don't really stop for, downtown or near the Bacon Social House. So I think there's maybe some education and enforcement that could be raised for the pedestrian crossings. Related, I heard that there was data being pulled for those like speed logging signs. So I was curious if that's going to be made public, and what the city plans to do with that data. Cause I'm kind of curious to see how fast people go on powers. And then looking through the presentation, there's just one communication section. I know it's more driven towards benefits, but I'm kind of curious if there's a resource where all the Safer Streets projects are listed in a spreadsheet and whether or not they're funded or their funding status, so that I don't have to keep bothering you guys about individual streets and can kind of get like a big picture of what's going on. So that's it.
Thanks, Casey.
Amazing timing.
Well rehearsed.
Practice.
And I'm Pam Chadbourne, and happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
So enjoy it safely.
Find your electric broom safely. Not you, but I mean, if you have one.
I like Harry Potter as much as
I would ride one if there was one.
So I also care about safe streets, but the more I think about it, the more I think separate and equal is better. And we have that opportunity. The United States now in general, we still have the opportunity to do that. If we don't do it now, we're not going to have the opportunity later because we're taking away all of the spare space by not enough parking. And so people are taking streets to park. We've got to do it now for the parallel paths, and I think they're the best way. I'm going to tell you why. It's not good to punish drivers. We need to serve both. Drivers are doing work. Many of them are delivering goods. They're in trucks, they're delivering groceries, or they're delivering hardware. We make money off of those stores in this city. We want those guys to get to those stores in and out quickly. We don't want them to make one trip a day. We want them to make many trips a day. There are people who maintain our homes, irrigation, plumbers, heat, HVAC. They all have heavy stuff. They're not going to be on their bike doing that work. We've got to give them a way in and out, and the more jobs they do every day, the more money they make. We've got to support that action. And we also get back and forth to work. I just drove back and forth to North Denver. And so I'm going to tell you, it is the violators, and they're always going to be there. No matter what you do in Safe Street, I saw these people go around me just in the past few days doing that. The violators are going to be there, and that's what we need to think about. But if they're a separate path, I think that's the best chance for me as a bicyclist or pedestrian. At least I'm with others who are doing that. And then the cars, those racers are going to be over there doing their thing. So the other thing I want to talk about is air pollution. Having people sit in traffic. Did you hear the news today that we're on path for 3 degrees centigrade? I do not want cars parked on the street idling for hours, which I just did back and forth. That is not the right way to solve this problem. You've got to solve the integrated problem, not just one thing. So anyway, probably, let's see. So the other thing I want to say is the right way to plan a city is to start with functional goals over time. Our city has never done that. And what I'd like you guys to think about is how many people are going to live in different places over time, and where do they need to get to, from, and to most often. And then we're going to design the city for that. And I'd like to see the transportation paths for that, and we'll design that. We can do it. I know.
Thank you. Hey, great comments tonight, everybody. I really appreciate that. I think that represents a pretty wide perspective. And I think that's one of the best things about this board. I mean, all of us here are citizens, and we all came to this with a particular point of view. And so we do welcome other members as we try to solve this, because we all know we can do better. Fortunately, we've got a really great city team that takes this stuff seriously. So I believe it's a great partnership, and it represents a the best examples of community involvement that I've seen. So, I did want to start before we get into the agenda. We did our trip around the city, and I want to thank you staff members for taking time out of your weekend, of all things, to come and do that with us and chauffeur our bodies around, and to Tim for driving, and even somebody smuggled snacks onto the bus. So that was really great. And we saw a lot of projects, and one of them that we just about finished out was down at the Mineral Light Rail Station. And of course, this was on a Saturday afternoon, and one of us wondered, well, what does this look like on a Monday about this time? So I happened to have the opportunity to come there on Monday and photograph that. That's one picture. I took several. I don't know if there's any more available, but so yeah, there's. It turns out it wasn't hard to get a parking spot down there at all. And the message to me is that as we look at these future ways of doing transportation, we want to be very leery of things that tie our hands forever. And it appears to me that the bargain we made with RTD to build out this network long before you folks were here and has not worked out very well. That we have a fixed guideway system that takes people from point A to point B, and when people decide that that isn't their route, it doesn't help them, and so this winds up being empty. I hope in the future it's going to be the locus of a mixed-use community that's going to really begin to revitalize that area, but today it's fallen far short of its promise. And I think the lesson to us is that as we design these things, the more nimble the system, the better the chance that it will be able to fit the needs of the user when it's actually there to be used. And so to some of the comments about separate bike, car, bus routes, going forward, I think we ought to try to take that to heart, because sinking incredibly large dollars for something that sits idle is it's a waste.
I was reading up recently about how from Strong Towns, I don't know if any of you have heard of Strong Towns, but Derek has, yeah. But they're a fantastic informational place. They said single-use structures often fail when things change.
Yes.
And it's not resilient. It's kind of their main point. Mixed-use things are very resilient, because you're not putting all of your eggs in the one basket. And I think
That's so true.
Yeah.
In so many different ways.
Yeah, and it would be great to see. That isn't with any of our decision for RTD, but yeah, it'd be nice to see.
Yeah, but we have more decisions coming, and so, as we do that, that's why I think some of these pilots are so cool, because they've given us a chance to try it out. It's not a huge capital investment to do it. We can then take the data, see if it's working. Is it slowing speeds? Is it doing what it was intended to do? So I don't know. It feels like we're on the right path. So I think that's probably about all my voice can stand, or you can stand in my voice. And Jeff, you are welcome to take over if I decide to just. I'm not sick, but my voice doesn't seem like it's going to support me for more than.
You tap out when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so let's get into safer streets. And I think
we wanted to
I apologize.
first recap the site visit.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. I mentioned it, but I skipped past it. So other takeaways from that. That was my takeaway, and I greedily then moved past everyone else's chance.
Maybe there were no more takeaways.
I think the two things that struck me, and I missed half of it, and I apologize for that, and I appreciate your graciousness. The resident that was yelled at us about the flags at the intersection of Elati and the other street that we were, I feel like I need to take that seriously, like it's a positive and a negative. And There was that one. The second thing is what I heard you say, Shane. Maybe you said it, Ken, and I apologize if I just gave Shane credit for what you said, but it's the flags don't slow people down. It's making them turn that slows people down. And so none of these are effective without people turning. And then the third thing that I took out of it is if all of our plans come to fruition, the Mineral Santa Fe intersection is way overtaxed. Like if that train comes in, that intersection's gonna be really busy. And, you know, we're making multi-million-dollar investments that I don't think are gonna last if that goes there. And right now, we're gonna debt fund our part of that as a city. And debt funding is, the theory behind it, and it's theory, right? It's not gospel, is that that makes sense because you pay it back over 30 years, you get to use it for 30 years, and every generation is kind of paying their share. But if it's not gonna last 30 years, it doesn't make sense. And money's fungible. It's like, if we didn't do debt there, we'd do debt somewhere else. So it's a straw tower. It's not a strong argument, but it just makes me pause. So those are the things I got out of it.
And when you say the train, you mean front range passenger?
Yeah. But thank you for clarifying that.
Hey, Robert, one other thing that I thought of at that intersection near where the guy yelled at us and said, I want to be able to get my truck through here because I have a business. It also gave me an opportunity to go look at that intersection again and think about the tragic accident with Liam Stewart. And I don't think I've ever really heard anybody say with authority that we've gotten to root cause on that accident. And as I looked at that, the tree that hung down and obstructed the view of the driver that would be facing eastbound on Arapahoe, the traffic circle was in the way. The tree, which I never thought about, but it was the biggest obstruction of all and would have been in the direction of travel that the young lad took as he came down the hill. And so when we talk about investing, we're going to we as a community have just reacted viscerally to that whole thing. And we now want to make investments that are going to stop that from happening again. But if we don't address root cause, if it really was a tree branch and we don't, and we're not honest with ourselves about what that is, or was that a contributory factor, then we're liable to spend a lot of money chasing something that isn't really what caused the problem or others like it. So that was a takeaway that I had. And that's one of the advantages of being on the ground at a situation. Not the first time that I've walked that intersection, but it was seeing it in that moment. It occurred to me that perhaps we're overlooking that and not talking about that enough.
Yeah, I took that conversation to the city manager's office. There was a lot of conversation that went on around that as you guys weighed in. And you know, the city we have as a city, we are increasing our investment in code compliance. And so we're doing a little more. We have a few more staff there, and we've consolidated the kind of trash and nuisance part of our code to try to make that easier to navigate. And I had a conversation with the city manager that I think we also need to kind of consolidate the communication channels between that part of the city and the transportation part, because it felt to me like there were kind of two separate conversations going on, one about trash and another around blind spots, or however you want to describe what you just said. So I at a minimum, your comments led to another conversation about it. So I don't know, but I was struck by what you saw and what you said. And I'm not I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure we know exactly, like there's any one single root cause to that accident.
True.
And I personally am, you know, I believe it's worth trying to improve the safety in his name, even if we're not actually going to solve the cause of that crash. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember when the police came, they were saying that the reason she identified was the sun was in her eyes because it was her in the morning. But in talking with Josh, I think that, you know, and what is the name of the manual? That is like MUTS. Yeah, MUTSD. That manual.
Can you just say it again?
One more time.
MUTCD.
Yeah. That manual like apparently, and then in the highway manual, I think, it says if there's an intersection like that where there's like kind of a thing to slow people down. You never have it where two paths are always on, no stopping, no yielding, and then two are stopped. Because in a high traffic situation, it creates in a situation where the two that are trying to cross on the Arapahoe roads there, they're like, they have very small windows and they have to go. And it seems like that was possibly what happened with her, where she was going and he was coming down and she just like was looking left, quickly looked. He may have been behind that windshield thing, he may have been right there and then she came across and hit him. And so I was chatting, I think, with Emily on, do we make it so all four of those coming in at both of those circles, are a stop or a slow down? And I go through the one at the bottom of the other side of Ridge by Runyon every day on my bike, coming in the same situation, not on a Lottie, but on the stops ones. And even the cars that are going straight sometimes just stop for me when I pull up and stop. They stop for me and it's like, it's just so ambiguous, in all of those as to what's really happening. And I feel like that's an area where we could potentially try like a pilot project or something to try like all yields, or something like that and see if that actually does. Because I did read, and this was very contrary to my viewpoint, like my assumptions, but it is safer when all four directions are a yield. There are less accidents than even when all four are stops, because people assume that everyone else is stopping when it stops, and no one assumes everyone's stopping when it's a yield. So people are much more cautious actually in those situations than they are in stops, which was not at all my assumption. So anyway, I think that we could try things there, to make it so we don't have the two always on, especially in the morning when it's school time, and then the others that are stopped.
I look forward to, I think there's a lot to talk about education and behavior change. There's so much of what we're all saying right now is about even switching to yield signs is still a infrastructure piece, and which would need to come with a fair amount of education. If we're both yielding, then who, and so, and I know that's in the slides, and to me, it feels like actually one of the most important and hands down most challenging components. So I think, I don't know, I'm just looking forward to that part of the dialogue, and that came up a lot for me when we were doing the tour, which was intended to be infrastructure focused. I mean, that was what we were doing, when like going to witness people behavior changing. But it's like, that's, I don't know, it will be challenging to say the least, so.
I know that just from the viewpoint that I've had with this being my first year and being able to see some of the work and some of the subjects that we got to see a lot of transportation projects. Some of them are addressing very recent issues. Some of them are addressing issues that have been needed to be dealt with for years and are now coming up in the capital improvement cycle. I'm looking forward to seeing what this is going to look like next year as we evaluate these and see the accountability of the improvements and the changes that the city makes to address the problems that are coming up. Because one of the biggest things we got to make sure is whatever changes we bring are going to be effective. And some of these projects and some of these may not have the effects that we all want, but we need to evaluate, say 6-12 months after they're there and compare to what we're seeing now, see if we see an improvement in the situation. And if not, we need to figure out why and bring that information back to the city and help address the citizens' concerns as well.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting point of, do we capture bike and pedestrian traffic in any way? Like, oh, we do, yeah.
Some, yeah.
Because, like Robert a bit ago was saying, when we were chatting about, do we do complete streets, do we do safe streets? You're saying part of our approach is not just to make it so no one dies. That's certainly a very important part of it. But it's also, do people feel so comfortable on these streets that we get more people out and riding on it? You know, and something like a Lottie, you know, it would be intriguing for us if those like cord things that go across the street, you know, if those were also capturing bicycle, you know, traffic on there and saying, after we did these improvements, were more kids riding to school, you know, as well. Like that would be an intriguing thing to track too.
Yeah, and diving into equipment a little bit, we do have counters that are sensitive enough to detect bikes and distinguish those from vehicles. Part of the hard part is the amount of work it takes to put them out. So the ones that we prefer are radar counters, which cannot detect bikes and pedestrians because there's not enough metal in you. But because we can go hang those, I can drive out, hang them on a telephone pole and leave them there for 2 weeks and then come grab it. With the tubes, we need traffic control, all this other stuff, so it's a little bit more intensive. So not that we can't, but it's not quite as easy as our radar counters. So.
And I would say that's I think across the industry, bikes and peds is something that is really hard and people are constantly trying to figure out how to do it better. And make better solutions so that it's more quick and easy for us to deploy that type of technology and counting system. So I think they're working on it. Like our grid smarts are supposed to count bikes and peds. We don't trust the numbers. We don't feel like they're actually capturing, like we were out there. Was that last week?
Yeah.
We were out last week at Broadway and Mineral and Broadway and Littleton Boulevard. And so we were at lunchtime, you know, looking at observing all the students from Epic and from Littleton High School crossing Broadway to go to lunch at Chipotle, King Supers, whatever. And I think you would check the grid smarts, and from our just like anecdotal observations, the numbers were wildly different. So we're hoping they can keep working on that technology because we would love to have, you know, constant data collection at some of our bigger intersections and then be able to deploy other things at locations. So.
Being able to track it is intriguing too, because I saw a video of a street in Copenhagen and it was like a lot of people say, why are we optimizing for bikes when there's no bikes out here? We only see car traffic. And it was showing an intersection and there was like in the light, the cars came up and stacked up very quickly and it was traffic. And the bikes, like were more people were on the bikes than in the car, but the bikes cleared through almost in a second. And then it looked like there were no bikes, but they're so efficient that they just got through so quickly. And they were like, it would be really nice to be able to track this better, you know, because it feels like, you know, we're building bike lanes for nobody and then the cars are always stuck in traffic, but that's just because cars are really inefficient and can't move very quickly through a city, you know, so.
And that'll get probably exponentially better over the next few years with the development of AI. I was at a conference earlier in the week and Greeley is using AI to do asset management. So they have attached cars to some work vehicles and cameras to work and they're towing cars, cameras, and they're constantly scanning the street, identifying potholes, graffiti, code compliance issues. And they said that it's pretty accurate. About 90% of the time it identifies it correctly, but they'll be able to be much more proactive. And it's speaking in or painting with broad brushstrokes and knowing nothing about AI. Generally, that's what's happening with our cameras, right? The cameras are looking at an intersection saying, this is a car, this is pedestrian, this is a cyclist. So
They're pretty good at that. Yeah.
So
is there a way to track like button pushes at like the hops at the street crossings and stuff like that? Is maybe a alternative way of tracking pedestrian, at least separating some of the uses from cars?
What do you do with the anxiety pushing? I gotta go.
It's like spamming.
There are trail cams
Burst noise.
as well that, you know, can differentiate between peds and bikes. And so like South Suburban has some permanent trail counters out on, you know, Mary Carter Greenway. I think there's some on Highline Canal, some on Legal General.
yeah. So and our RFBs, which are the standalone flashing lights, those they count when you push the button. So please push the button. I get frustrated when you see people not because we use that data. Yes.
I did that tonight. I went to go push it and then I realized no one was there, so I just went.
Yeah.
The data.
But at our big intersections like Broadway and Littleton, the ped face comes up automatically because we know there's a bunch of pedestrian traffic, so we wouldn't necessarily count there. That's where we're looking for better counting technology at those major intersections to do it for us. So,
and of course, cyclists are going to use that because that's the only way we can trip the signal.
Yeah, and yeah, we're actually, for some of our newer projects, looking into equipment that maybe can detect cyclists far off, so that we can give them, you know, kind of anticipate their movement, and if that lines up with a signal, allow them to go through safely, so.
Impressive, do that.
All right, well,
Push Shane's buttons.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll just mention on this, you know, a lot of our grant applications also ask about like bicycle and pedestrian numbers as well. So, you know, it's important for us to be capturing this data to help us get more money as well.
Hold up the money.
So I will say, since we're on the note of that, like my observation, one of the things I walked away, the big one thing I walked away with was that intersection as well.
Which,
The Elati and Arapahoe intersection. And, you know, obviously that is an intersection that's on all of our minds a lot. I think you guys are trying a lot of things to make that better. I don't know how we make that better short of some significant changes. So maybe four-way stop. But that, if we think about what happens there, that is, we're trying to get we would like students to get to school via bike or pedestrian. If they're taking a bike and they're trying to use that bike lane, there is not enough room in that intersection and just the way the flow works for a bike and a car to exist in there where the bicyclist is going to be safe. It's just not.
And it bumps the car out and there's no markings for the bike lane. And so it's like very ambiguous.
But no, the reality is, I mean, if you think about, you know, going to Tom's point of looking at that particular incident and trying to figure out what happened. I know what happened. I used to take my son to school that exact way. The way that anybody from that side, those neighborhoods, if they're driving their kid to school, they're going down Arapahoe, they cut across and they do the jag, and it takes them right into Euclid, right in front of the Euclid front doors. And there's a lot of people that do that. And it's early in the morning. They haven't had all their coffee yet. You know, they'll have one or two or three other kids in the back. They're trying to get to a different school. I mean, the issues are for that, and I'm sure there's other intersections around the city that I'm not as familiar with, that we're not going to solve that problem unfortunately, by putting some C-curve in and making people curve around a little bit. The ways we solve that is we either have to figure out an entirely different bike route, and in that particular area, I don't know if there is one. That is the most natural one. We have to put in either, you know, or four-way stops, potentially, right? Forcing traffic to come to a stop so that people don't feel rushed to try to get through. Or, and I've thrown this thought out before and I got shot down very quickly. I don't understand why we couldn't just block off the east side of Arapahoe there. There's still entrance, there's still access for all the people who live there. They just go around to Stern Parkway, but it stops people from going through. I mean, and a lot of this comes down to like school issues, right? I have taken my kids to school many days and I've walked my kids to school many days, and drop off and pick up is it is dangerous. I mean, there are so many cars weaving in and out and everybody's distracted trying to figure this out and that out. And another idea that I've thrown out that got shut down is I think we need to think about working with the schools to say there's a 2-block area around school that is just shut down to automotive traffic.
I love that idea.
And if you think about, if you've been, Matt always likes to bring up the European cities. If you go to any big city really, right, where they are prioritizing pedestrian traffic, busy areas where they want to have a lot of people flow in and out, they don't allow cars in there because pedestrians take up way less room. It's way more efficient. And they just keep cars out of that area. I mean, go to any major train station go to a train station in any major European city, you can't get within a block or two of that train station car. You have to stop 2 blocks away and walk in or find some other way to get into it. And so I think we can keep trying, but I don't know. I think we can spend a lot of money on the intersection and we're not going to fix that core problem.
I mean, I rode to the William Memorial ride, and I don't ride that neck of the woods. And yeah, the C-curb that we put up for the crosswalk just to the north of the school. It's a good thing I'm a good cyclist because it forced me, I had to go into the lane. I had to go out of the bike lane. I had to take the lane, and I'm comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
But if you're not,
If you're a 12-year-old,
if you're a 12-year-old, you're not going to be listening to the car coming up, and you're not going to have that mindset. And so I had looked back, and yes, I could go out, and then I took the lane, the whole lane.
Which makes people real upset. Yeah.
I don't care.
It's legal, but yeah.
Absolutely, it's legal. And if they want to discuss it, I'd be happy to. But so, yeah, I mean, but yet the C curb for the crosswalk, yeah, I get that. We're trying to delineate that that's a theoretical safe zone and to slow the cars down. So it goes to Pam's point about how do we separate us? Because, yeah, there's always a downside to, yeah, it's good, but what about this? The unintended consequences. Yeah, a lot of these little bump outs. If you're a cyclist, you have to go out and lane.
Not to push my point too much, can you go to that intersection? Do you mind?
Yeah, this is Eladi and Peakview where that.
No, it's Arapahoe.
Okay, the one you were talking about.
Yeah. If you look at that road right there, right? Everybody's coming across and that Arapahoe to the right takes you over Stern Parkway and right to the front doors of Euclid. But there's a bike lane on that side going to school. We can't make that a fully protected lane in the danger zone, right? It could be a protected lane all the way up to that. It could be a protected lane on the other side of it, but but in order to get cars across, we can't put a barrier there. But if you block off Arapahoe right there, so that people who want to access Arapahoe in that area go around Stern Parkway and come in, now we can put a protected bike lane and it separates the cyclists from traffic completely.
One thing so the bike parking is on the far left side of Euclid though. So we'd have them go right to come back.
I'm saying the bike lane stays where it is.
Oh, okay, yeah,
You
yeah.
just where the bike lane on the right, the east side, the right side of the bike lane, if there's a barrier there, you just like that street is shut off there. There's no through access.
Yeah.
Now you have a bike lane all the way down.
Yeah.
On the way there.
One thing Carmel, Indiana does, which is one of the best bicycle infrastructure cities in the US, I won't mention a European city this time. They have,
No, please, I want to hear more about Copenhagen.
they have bike,
How does Oslo deal with this?
their crosswalks and their bike lanes are at the level of the sidewalk across the intersections. And I actually think that could be one of the better ways, and that costs money, so that's a different consideration. But that costs money to raise the bike lane, like the bike lane gets risen up with the level of the sidewalk. They both stay at that grade going across the intersection, so the cars just have bumps. And that tells them you are crossing into this other area that is not meant for you. So slow down and be cautious as you do it, which I think by Runyon, Kelly, where our kids, have gone and other places, that could be really impactful too. Is this Carmel? Yeah.
I don't know an intersection, so I'm just kind of playing.
They have like their main strip,
Bluff.
their main street has some incredible bike infrastructure. Yeah.
Their Main Street, is it called Main Street or just like?
I think it's like the main commercial area. If you just do a Google search of Carmel bike lane, it might show up for an image search.
What would the drainage implications be on going down the hill? Because that's at the bottom of a hill. It would seem like we'd have some sewer and stormwater implications to rebuild that.
Yeah, I think if it was going south down the hill, and it's not south, it's actually north, but if it was going north, yeah. It would be parallel with the flow of water. So I don't think it would necessarily, but you could have a little gap in it, to let water through as well.
I mean, the current plan for next year is to do Euclid Avenue as the full bike lane. Invest $2 million into Euclid Avenue.
Yeah.
Which is, we're talking about a lot here, but that's where the council has been told we're essentially gonna make this is what a gold standard bike lane, protected bike lane.
And would that be from Eladi to Broadway?
Yes.
Which I bet doesn't get that much bike traffic. Seems like-
So we are also, I will say, working through design right now on that. I hesitate calling it a gold standard at this point.
So to bring us back to reality.
Sorry, I being this person. We're trying our best with that one, with Euclid in particular, trying to accommodate all the modes. There's trade-offs that you have to figure out, and there are residences that face Euclid. Currently, the bike the drop-off pickup lane is along Euclid as well. the school is actually looking at using some extra bond funding to redo their site circulation. So we are working with the school and with the consultant. So as of right now, it could change, but we would be doing a shared use path on the north side. So still a high comfort facility. It would be, we're hoping about 13 feet on the north side. So it wouldn't be like protected bike lanes on either side of the roadway. It would be one shared use path on the northern side.
Is the shared use path, like if it's for walking as well, presumably it would be sidewalk level, not
Yes.
road level, so that would be still a great
Yeah.
improvement, yeah.
Yeah, and in front of the school, typically would probably have to be a dismount zone during pickup and drop off, just because of the interaction between
Makes sense.
pedestrians. You have to be careful with that, so. I mean, it still is a complete street, but I just don't want everyone to picture like protected bike lanes, because that's probably not what's going to happen.
Right-lane traffic on the same side?
Yeah, it would be two-way.
Two-way.
So I,
13 feet's pretty wide.
Yeah.
And that would be the first kind of piece of that type of infrastructure in the city. I think there'll be similar infrastructure in the Mineral Santa Fe development. Things go to plan.
I think what we discovered too is that it wasn't 2 million specifically for the bike and
That's right.
ped.
There's also a mill overlay part.
Yeah, it was 800,000 additional that you all set aside, I think.
6, but yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, for specifically to make the better infrastructure for the bike and ped. Yeah, this is an example right here of how they have the raised for the bicycle paths and sidewalks. Yeah,
Well, the other raised conversation we're having is how much do we want to invest in, this is a slight detour, but only slight. How much do we want to invest in making Main Street all on the same level?
there's a meeting for that soon, I think.
Yeah, as a meeting.
Yes, yeah, I have that on my calendar. Yes. Yeah.
We're talking now in the council, kind of what are our investment priorities within the Main Street plan? And that raised kind of 2-block area of Main Street is a significant investment.
Oh, yeah.
And is that our priority?
so can I ask you,
And I apologize if that took us off track, so.
you're
No,
fine.
it's similar.
So at the risk of being,
Gallivanting around Indiana.
at the risk of being obnoxious here, if we do a thought experiment, if there are no cars on Euclid Avenue during school hours,
Or buses?
or no buses, I feel like buses can be there. If there's no cars, there's no, other than buses and people who literally live on that street who are trying to get out or trying to get in, there's no other cars. Do we need a protected bike lane would we need a protected bike lane on Euclid? Like, I've gone by Euclid many times outside school hours, there's never any cars on that street, like hardly ever. Only during drop off and pickup.
And during sports events, but if the reason there's there during drop off and pickup is that's how people get to school now.
I understand.
So I just feel like you're swimming upstream.
I also think too that it can never be no cars. Like there has to be space for cars because there are kids who come in wheelchairs and things like that cannot use.
There's always gonna be exceptions.
Yeah. But
If you got rid of 95% of the cars on that street, maybe I'll say, if you got rid of 95% of the cars on the
I
street.
want to stay on city council.
But I think too, like, I think that if a protected bike path, from what I've read, protection of cyclists and pedestrians is dictated in most places that do it really well by speed. So the speed that you permit a car to travel in is what dictates what type of infrastructure you have to build for everyone else on the street. That is kind of the gold standard of how to dictate it. So like if we made Euclid slow enough by design, not slow enough by a sign that everyone ignores, signs don't slow people down, infrastructure does, then I think it could be potential, but yeah.
There is something to always keep in mind though. If cars that would normally go down Euclid are not going down them, they're gonna find another path to go down. And those could be things that were not problems before that with the new traffic load may now become the new problems of tomorrow.
Yeah, if there's no cars on Euclid, then drop offs on Broadway.
That would work.
Yeah, and there are, like Denver has a lot of neighborhood bikeways, is what they call them, and they try to get speeds to the 95th percentile to I think 20 miles per hour. Shane might know this, but it's a series of traffic calming and it's not separated facilities. It's, what you might consider a share out. So you're in the roadway, but the idea is that cars are so slow that everyone is sharing the space, right?
Yeah,
We
and
don't have an example like that here.
the speed in Europe is 15 miles. If a car can go over 15 miles per hour, then it cannot be a share.
And would you put the speed bumps back on Euclid after the mill and overlay? Or whatever those raised things
We're
are?
going to replace them with raised pedestrian crossings at the crosswalks.
Yeah, that's
So there will be 2 in front of the school and then 1 at the Highline Canal.
I love that too, because it's like, I
There will be
can't say
one
killing 2
that-
birds with 1 stone, but like, it's
Easternmost school used to be called Whitman, now it's called,
options.
the Options is in there, but the building has a different name. The Acoma, they call it the Acoma.
So we're not putting one there because of drainage issues. And this is me trying to be an engineer right now. Something with the drainage issues, we couldn't put another race crossing there, but we will be having traffic calming around the Acoma intersection.
Yeah, because that school is where the transitions program is. I think I've said this to you before. That's what the transitions program is for young adults between 18 and 21 who are have disabilities and they're kind of being trained. So you see like troops of people going to Broadway to catch the bus and those kind of things. So there's people there who are successfully navigating the world but face some challenges.
Hey, a lot of great conversation. We spent a lot of time on that area around Euclid. Were there, and some stuff around Santa Fe and Mineral. Were there any other observations, takeaways that people want to bring it up as we kind of put a pin in the tour about town?
I'll have one last one. I promise it's short.
Okay.
So we often go and look at things and recognize the problems. But I think a lot of things are getting better and we don't often pause and thank staff and others to say, this is getting better, and we're making, it's not getting better all at once or as fast as we want. Yeah, and I think we're really grateful that you all took the initiative to start some of these things, and move them forward and hopefully it even gets better moving forward. So thank you for that. Yeah.
No, I think that's a good observation. Thank you, because you may feel sometimes like you work as hard as you possibly can, and then there's always somebody, some amateur looking over your shoulder, second guessing how you could have done it better. But well done.
Well, I agree, and I appreciate you saying that because, I think the more things change, the more political problems we're going to run into as a community around these kind of changes. And we all, because we're in these conversations, the most informed people in our neighborhood. And so we all play a role in kind of just having those conversations to cover, everybody's back as to why this is a valuable investment for the city. So, thank you because I do appreciate you guys' leadership, but I think we all need to have opportunities to step up.
Well, I think we should get you a beard, and when we do the tree lighting the day after Thanksgiving, you can be Santa Claus and explain all of the good things.
Here's a protected crosswalk. Here's a protected.
Ways.
Teaching bike safety.
You want some C curb? Some C curb.
Yeah. A bicycle drawn sleigh, I think we'll put that in that. So a plan is coming together. All right, well, thanks, everybody. So let's wade back into a little deeper into safer streets, and I think what we talked about is a bit of a look ahead to where we're going to be going.
I'd rather read that.
Yeah, and so kind of give an overview and so when we met with Tom and Jeff earlier, like one of the things Jeff asked about is like, I want to see everything overall, right? And then one of the things that we're kind of thinking about as staff is in February, we have our next Safer Streets presentation to council, and that will really kind of focus on what have we done so far, but then what is coming in year 2 of the Safer Streets initiative. And so because you guys as a board worked so hard on kind of coming up with these goals that you presented to council over the summer, we want to make sure that that is incorporated into year 2 of Safer Streets. So we thought that we would kind of combine those things into one topic, which is like, let's start fleshing out those goals and objectives that you guys came up with. Rather than just those 6 points, like let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's talk about what we're already doing, and then you guys can help us figure out what else needs to be done. And also look at some of the maps that we have from the TMP, but also some that we have created for this meeting that look at overall what is being done for bike and pedestrian stuff. There's a lot of it you can't see right now, right? A lot of it is in planning or design, and this will be 2025 will kind of be the first year that a lot of this stuff hits construction. So you'll be tired of it next year. But until then, we thought a map was the best way to show this. So that's kind of an overview of what we'll talk about tonight.
Yeah. So just to quickly remind us what the recommendation that you all presented to council is, that you support Safer Streets Littleton and aim to expand this into a sustainable program. The city's mission is to create a connected, comfortable, and comprehensive multimodal network by integrating the principles of Vision Zero and Complete Streets. We strive to create behavioral and cultural change, championing a balanced transportation system for a safer community.
Kelly's point. Hard part.
So, and I know Tom and Jeff, when we met before, originally we thought we would just go through the first 2. We actually decided let's go through all 6, and then we can decide how we want to spend the next couple months before our February meeting of like, you know, which objectives do we need to dive more into? Where do we want to go with this? So we'll go through each of these goals more in depth. So first goal, provide a better connected bike and pedestrian network within the neighborhoods that interconnects with existing trails. This includes high comfort, well-connected, dedicated, and protected facilities. Let's not neglect safety on our arterial roadways, and let's implement a systematic approach. I'm actually going to go into edit mode for the remainder of this. So we as a team sat down and started thinking, what for each objective or each goal, what are we already doing? What have we already completed? And then what is upcoming? And then we want to go together as a group. I'll show you some maps. What we're, you know, anything that we're missing, what is the funding mechanism? And then what is TMB's role in all of this? So we'll see if we can get through all 6 tonight. We'll find out. So this first one, better connected bike and pedestrian network. So things that we are already doing. We have ongoing grant funded projects, as we mentioned before, and you know, we saw some of those on our field trip. So 9 projects are going to construction either between the end of this year and 2025. You're going to be really sick of construction next year, just FYI. And we have hit, or we have addressed 12 of our 15 high injury network locations from publishing the TMP. So that's kind of our ongoing, and these are our big, you know, and a lot of our grant funded projects are on our regional roadway networks. So we were able to get regional funding through TIP grants. And we're able to address a lot of these high injury network locations. As we've discussed though, as these are on our major arterials, we necessarily haven't been focusing a lot on our connector streets, right? Like Elati and Windermere and those types of things. Other things we're already doing are pilot projects and quick builds. So, you know, we're almost finished installing most of our pilot projects. Our quick builds are our protected bike lanes. We're still getting materials. We'll hire some contractors to install those. 2 of them this year. 2 of them will be included in our pavement management program next year. Other things that we're doing that help with, you know, bike ped safety and connectivity, project downtown. As we mentioned, there is an open house Monday evening. Please come to Bemis Library. We're also going to council twice in November, one at a study session to give an overview, and then the next week we'll hopefully go to adoption. Our traffic calming evaluation. So a lot of talk around the traffic circles, especially along at Elati. Our traffic calming evaluation is looking at those. We're looking at all of our traffic calming measures citywide. We wanted a third-party objective look at this and look at data. And so we will be having recommendations from that at the February council meeting. And then our school zone safety evaluation, which we've talked about as well. Things that we've already completed: Littleton Linkages Trail Study, our Broadway Corridor Study, the Kettering and Gallup Parks Master Plan, and then the school route wayfinding and route planner. That's all of the school routes, wayfinding signs, and then the route planner on our website. And then things that are upcoming. So we have our ATIP corridor studies. That's that big federal grant we applied for 9 corridor studies along our collector routes and mainly routes to school. I was at a conference this week and a representative from FHWA was there, and I tried to ask them what they're doing. They didn't give me an answer, so. Other things upcoming in 2025, we will be doing a Littleton Boulevard sub area plan, and transportation bike ped safety is going to be a big part of that. We have other grant funded projects through Arapahoe County Open Space. This includes underpass feasibility study at the Highland Canal and Mineral Avenue. And then the 2 trail design projects, the Santa Fe Trail connection that we talked about that will go into the new development, and then the community trail connection to Stern Parkway, Stern Park.
Sorry, what's the sub area plan?
So it's looking at a broader area than just Littleton Boulevard. It'll also capture a couple blocks, both north and south as well. So looking at more than just that one roadway.
From my perspective, the sub-area plan, the transportation is a small part of it. There's also a component that's historical preservation and a component about economic development.
So it's different, like a corridor study really just focused on the street. Like, how is it different, I guess, than that study?
Yeah, I think part of it's nomenclature. To Councilmember Reichardt's point, this this is being led by community development and not by Public Works, whereas like the Broadway corridor study was led by Public Works, and then community development and economic development had a role in it. So this is going to be a little broader focused on historical preservation, land use, design guidelines, and transportation. Does that make sense? Ongoing school route work. So we've created 8 school routes and installed signs for those. We want to work with our other 4 remaining schools to install signs and create routes with them. And then the TMP update that is tentatively planned for 2026. So some maps that we wanted to show you.
2026.
So a couple things. In our TMP, we have bike priority streets and pedestrian priority streets. So these are the bike priority streets. And so we just kind of wanted to go through a series and
These are out of the TMP, all these maps we're about to look at?
well,
That's the base.
kind of.
Yeah, like the bike and ped priority streets, those are from the TMP. So
Yeah.
then we're talking about projects we have going on. See.
So this is from the TMP. And then we wanted to show everything highlighted is either ongoing or future bike ped work. So this is a combination, and some of it's planning level, some of it's design level, some of it's construction level. So it's in different phases, but we just wanted to show on this map, you can see the bike priority streets and then all of the work that we have ongoing to try to address this. So we are covering a lot of the identified network from the TMP. So this includes those 9 corridor studies as part of that ATIP grant. That's still a little in flux that hopefully we get. This includes like our Lottie corridor study, Broadway corridor study, Littleton Boulevard, a future Bowles corridor study that we have grant funding for. Our bike pilot or quick builds, so along like Bellevue, Phillips, Pennsylvania, Windermere, the different developments and projects along Mineral as well. Anything else, Shane, you want to add to this?
No, I think that's a pretty good list, but yeah, it includes everything, because one of the things we were speaking with Jeff and Tom was like, hey, we hear about all these projects, but it's hard to kind of like put them all on one map. So that's what we try to do here, not necessarily distinguish between what's it construction, what's it planning, but like, this is everything overlaid on our bike priority network from the team.
This is hugely helpful. I mean, just
I agree.
give everyone else context, like part of my This was one of the other observations I had on this tour was it's like, hey, here's this nice little project we're working on here, and then we go across here, another one. And for me, it was very hard to picture like it felt scattershot, and I didn't think it was, but it felt that way because I couldn't see like, oh, well, look, we're filling in this spot here that we had already planned to make a pedestrian or bike priority street. And so then I can start to say, oh, got it. Like, I know we're not getting the whole thing, but at least we're getting this part of it in now. And so thank you very much. This is almost exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, and like I said too, you know, not all of this is like going to construction, right? And so I think there's, you know, it's kind of a first iteration for this, for next meeting, but we can continue to develop this too, to show, you know, what is purely planning and there's no construction funding identified. So there's a long way to go until we see it in the ground. But what is in design and will go to construction, what is going to construction, you get the picture I'm trying to paint.
Yeah, I do have a question on one of the areas. Downtown Littleton is conspicuously absent from bikeways on here. Is there a reason for that?
You're not allowed.
Well, I mean, I feel like when we talked about the downtown Littleton plan, I felt like the consensus was downtown Littleton is a place to bike to and walk through. And so that kind of makes sense to me that it's not a high priority for, but it is definitely a priority for pedestrian work.
Yeah, and you know,
There.
I will say this map is not perfect because I'm realizing like Little's Creek is not highlighted on here, and we should highlight that because that is already an existing bike ped facility downtown. And there's a recommendation in Project Downtown to make it even better. So thank you for pointing that out. I will make that change.
Good point.
And there is Prince Street too, which runs kind of north and south and goes through downtown, so.
Yeah, what we chatted about was like making protected bike lanes to get up Prince to Main Street. But then if you were going over to like, what's the Mexican restaurant that's really delicious that has the rooftop seating? Palenque. If you're going to Palenque, you know, you wouldn't necessarily, if it was like that raised village, you know, kind of a thing, you wouldn't necessarily ride, and you could, but like, you know.
Yeah, and I'm already.
Walk the 2 blocks over, because it's like 2 blocks.
And it's like, it's nice, it's like Pearl Street, you know, is the idea, hopefully, you know.
And Nevada, as part of Project Downtown, is recommended as a shared street, which, you know, is kind of that idea that everyone's allowed on the street, right? It's not just for cars, it's for pets, it's for bikes, it's for cars. So we can definitely add that. Also, Slaughterhouse Gulch connection, right here at Geneva Park isn't on here. So there's gaps in this I'm already realizing, so.
So, and
It's a good start though, and it
Yeah.
just helped you visualize the network.
I think there's gonna be a lot of discussion. I think we're gonna dump 20 to 30 million into downtown. And it's gonna be our first, one of our more recent forays into debt funding. And kind of the whole project downtown is, I think, over 100 million. So if any of you guys go, you all have my email, or we'll see each other. If you go to that and say, of the 5, 10, 15 things that are being discussed, these are my top 2 priorities. I welcome that feedback from you.
And we will be soliciting that
Yeah,
prioritization.
no, absolutely.
That's what we want to hear is like, what is your priority? Is it Main Street? Is it Prince? Is it else?
Yeah, one question I have, 2 questions I have is, one is, for that map overlay, is that, when it says bike play, well, actually, let me take a step back. One thing that I would love to see is like, what is the vision of the city? You know, both city staff and council, like what would it look like? Like if we did everything that we want to do in the next 10 to 15, 20 years, what would the end result be? I don't know that we have that, you know, like. Yes.
That's not on city staff.
Don't make me blush. I think that would be really fantastic to say like, if like you all as traffic experts, because this is something where like some people are saying, we have these meetings and like city staff speaks and we don't hear council speak. And then like we have the opposite perspective too. I actually don't want council to dictate what the streets look like because you all are experts at it. Like, you know, you all are the ones who actually get degree in these, go to conferences, know what, like, and we have like, you know, maybe a dentist, you know, is like, what, like, so, you know, just, I mean, as an example, like you all should know much more about the state of the art than that. So like setting a vision And saying, this is what we're moving towards, I think would be incredibly helpful. In 10 to 20 years, this is what it would look like. And then that brings me to the second part of that, which is when it says bike prioritized, what does that mean, actually?
Yeah, so two things. So page 92 of the TMP has our transportation projects. And so it has like color coded by like, hey, this should be a bike lane, this should be a protected bike lane, this should be an intersection project. And then so there's little like circles with numbers and you can go and read what that is. This obviously is our 2019 TMP, so this is something that would be updated with the next iteration of it. But as far as what does a priority street look like? That's where the last time we did the TMP, so kind of prioritizing streets, that's part of a complete streets process, right? You set modal priorities for the street, and then you get down and you say, okay, this street, it's this street type, we have these priorities, and this is what the street's gonna be planned out to look like. We did not go that far. We're getting pushed back on like doing the complete streets approach. So that's where, we don't know. And we're coming up, like we have the Littleton Engineering Design Standard that's starting to dive into that a little bit. But yeah, that's a gap, I would say.
So Matt, I'll tell you my view of this, and I would welcome the staff to tell me I'm completely wrong on this, but I view that we talked about the idea that we would like to have bike arterials is the word I think you and I used and everyone hated it. Or they hated it at least. But the idea that like here is 20 years from now, that there is a very widely understood map or clearly laid out map of if you want to ride a bike around Littleton, here if you can get to this street, you will have a very comfortable bike infrastructure. And this is how, if you want to ride your bike around town, if you can get the 4 blocks over to this street, you're set.
Kids can all funnel into those.
They can funnel into it. That's what I see that the red lines on this map, or this different map, but the bike priorities are. And so then in my mind, it comes to your question for them is just, so what does that street look like? What do those arteries look like once we get to there? And we can argue a little bit. We could argue whether these are the exact right streets and maybe we decide at some point, maybe it shouldn't be a Lottie, it should be this one over, but that this would be clearly delineated. And then for Robin, that would be the pedestrian priorities would be the same thing. If you want to walk around this town, you can get the few blocks over to this. Here's your map.
It would be incredible, and if we had like.
I'm not sure that works for pedestrians. Because the pedestrian wants to go where they want to go. They want to go everywhere.
Yeah, and
Every house is a pedestrian house, and so
I do
I'm not
think.
sure the analogy doesn't break down when you get to pedestrian throughways.
I like to walk to downtown. I live a little over a mile from downtown. And
No,
down there.
You add.
I have a great,
Confused.
comfortable way to do it.
Well, I go on Prince on my runs sometimes, and you have to like crisscross back around the road, because there's not even sidewalks on some parts of it.
Yeah.
So.
It's something we can like get some feedback from staff, but you guys just recently put up the school route wayfinding. Has that proven effective at guiding people into effective school routes? And if so, could we maybe expand that in this direction? Like, hey, this is a bike route, this is a pedestrian.
Yeah. How would you know? That's the thing I wondered about, Derek. How would you know if those signs, I see a lot of signs that say school route, but how do I
It's hard
know
to
they've done
quantify.
anything?
Yeah.
My interpretation of them was more of a flag. It was less about telling the students or others how to get to the school as it was about telling drivers, this is an active route that people are using to get to school.
I think that's a good
So
point.
be cognizant of that and less about the
Okay,
wayfinding.
And I get that.
That's how
Now,
I.
how do we know that works now? That's the thing I'm wondering.
I just think that was the way I.
And I think that's cool. I think that's part of the purpose of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, they serve a dual purpose. So the signs that have like the times and the directions, those are for wayfinding. The ones that are on top of the street signs that say school route are meant to alert drivers to the fact that like you're on a school route, so.
Yeah.
Has there been any feedback?
Complexity or problems and things? But I
Has there
don't
been any
understand
feedback
why
about the?
Doesn't have these signs. You're on South Suburban Trails.
They are.
Every half mile or so, there's a sign that says like, here's the trail system and
Gotcha.
you're here. I don't know why when you're on a bike route, it couldn't be the same thing.
No,
Or
I think I get your meaning, Jeff. You're talking about kind of routes through town kind of thing. Like, how would you get to downtown from where I'm at? And I'm with you now.
Yeah.
That says, okay, you're gonna take Lee Gulch Trail and you're gonna you know, at some point here, you're gonna get off on Prince Street and there's a nice wide sidewalk all the way into Palenque where I can have my lunch.
Yeah, and like, I think my perspective too is that, you know, when we looked at Carmel, their bike lanes were different color.
Which European country is that?
That's Indiana.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
It's more exotic.
It's to Estonia.
Just.
So that one is,
Indiana.
they have like their bike paths are different colors as well. And so it like really does a good job of like, you get on the red path and you follow the red path all the way to your location, you know, and we could have something similar, you know, here where we have this bike network and we have a different color. And then like when it crosses the streets, people know you're crossing over that. It could be a really fantastic thing.
What about for the color?
Yes, there's always
Different textures.
There's always them.
Derek, to your point, I don't think we're getting that feedback and we would like to. And you know, as we're starting to really build out a Safe Routes to School program, getting like travel surveys out to all the schools is a big part of that. And so I think that's definitely something that we could incorporate into future surveys. The one thing, this is not included in the packet, this was just an ad this week. We wanted to layer in the school routes just to see how it overlays with the projects that we're doing and the big priority streets. So the school routes are in blue, so you can kind of see how those overlay. Where they don't, and you know, there's maybe some areas that are school routes that we're not necessarily addressing that. So in the essence of time, I would like us to start thinking about, for this better connected bike and pedestrian network, are there things that we are missing currently?
I just don't know, like lots of times the city of Littleton, I feel like has like taken a stencil out and painted a bike on the road and said, this is a bike path. And so I don't know what this means. This is what is my feedback to you all of like, yeah, like.
And that's where they came, that's where they are the experts, to your point. They should
Yes.
show it. This is what a comfortable bike park.
And this is the vision that staff wants to put forward for the city of Littleton, that we tell people we're driving towards, you know, and we look for funding, you know, and things to make these things happen. Like what does it mean, you know? And then what is the vision of it, you know?
We have a vision. I mean, it was even in the first slide and the TMP came with a vision. And I mean, I think they're out there and it's a matter, I think, you know, a vision is intentionally high level. You're, you know, 20 years out from now, it's hard to put it in anything more concrete than a somewhat abstract, because there's change and like we were speaking about resilience and adaptation too, right? Like, so past a 20-year vision that gets, I think, into a more granular level is really challenging because of the way that things might change.
I don't think it's challenging to say like, is it protected or not protected? You know, or like something like that, you know, is certainly.
Okay, so then I guess then it's just a different interpretation of the statement of vision.
Yeah.
Because to me, that gets into more of the tactics and less about. Yeah, so I think it's just an interpretation of the word.
So Kenna, were you asking for, are there parts of this bike and trail and pedestrian system that also need to be looked at that are not included? Because I have one. Which is where the Centennial Link Trail crosses Main Street in Alamo. I've seen multiple challenges where people are not walking up to the crossing that we have and they're running across the street. I think we have and maybe this is too detailed for what you asked and I apologize if I went into the weeds, but that's a problem that has been raised.
Yeah, and I'm realizing I don't think we had all of our trail connectivity recommendations on here. So that's another.
And then the other one is when you get to the southern end of this thing, there's not a whole lot of east-west.
On the south end of the city.
Yeah. Well, like if we had a protected bike lane.
I do want to keep us more at a higher level than going
So
into.
my bad.
No, you're fine. That's all right.
So
One comment I had about the previous slide, there's a lot of things that are happening now and coming in the future. And you're asking us what else? And I'm just concerned that you have a small but mighty team, but adding more may not be to the benefit if it's taking attention away from all these other things that are already planned or happening.
Totally, absolutely.
So I think we need to think about that.
No, and thank you for saying that, because I think you're right. We are, we've taken on a lot over this last year. And even though we've added staff, we're kind of at capacity still. So I think also when we're thinking about what's missing, it's not necessarily what staff can take on, but what else you take on, what
Okay.
other departments take on.
Fair enough.
I appreciate that, because you're right. I mean, this is also long-term thinking, because we do have all of our like grant funded projects and other commitments, that we're pretty lined up for next year of like what we're going to be able to accomplish with our staffing capacities.
Maybe through that line, something we can say what we're missing is like, as these projects are being built out and we can evaluate them for the effectiveness, what other actions do we need to look at? Like whether it's engineering standards, whether it's TMB updates, like some of these other documents and things where we can invest our time while we wait for results on everything else. I think that would be a really good focus.
I think one thing that could be good too is if, like, I think, Kelly, to your point of like the broader vision without getting into tactics, I do think like saying, we're gonna try to get everyone within 4 blocks of a high comfort bike lane, having a map, that map that you just showed, and then having like little radius things with the different colors, of showing like, if we built this, everyone would be within a 1/4 of a mile from a high comfort network, and I think that is a vision that we could probably that council and others could sell potentially, at, thing to say, our goal is to make it so everyone was within a certain distance of a high comfort network, to get where they need to go without going into the specifics.
But I think you skipped over the most important part. We don't have a map. We need a map of the bike and trails and,
The L1 and the L, and all the other Littleton bike paths.
and that's not something for transportation to deal with necessarily. That's something for.
And that is something we are working in the background actually on, so.
I think out loud, like we're doing 2 different things, right? We're talking about the 20-year vision and we're talking about like helping people today.
Yeah.
So I'm almost picturing that map as like, we could put both on there, right? Where it's, your little red lines, I shouldn't say little, the red lines show this is where we're going long-term. And then much like you did for the projects we're working on, there's a layer that shows here's what we're done with. Like here are and we have very few so far, but we'll have some soon. Here are these are the current, as of today, high comfort arterials, where you can go. And then maybe there's a slightly different colors, like, and here's where in the next 2 years or 3 years, we have plans to have that be. But again, it helps people see like, this is where we're going long-term. We want to build this so that this city is bikeable / walkable, depending on which one we're looking at. Here's what it's gonna look like eventually, and here's what you can use today, like right now.
And would Google be able to do that for us? I mean, conceivably, if you look at, you pull up your navigation in your iPhone and say, I want to walk from A to B, and my mode of travel is pedestrian. A lot of that's in there. So, maybe, is that the map we want to have, Robert, rather than developing our own, reinventing our own map program?
No, I just reflect on the fact that when we go to public events, the thing that people pick up the most is the South Suburban's trail map. And we don't have a similar thing.
You're thinking a paper map that we can hand out? Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was not following that, yeah.
But it
I was
also,
like, she just showed like.
it would also be a map that goes on those signs that you were suggesting we put up. And we don't have a map of how do you walk and bike around Littleton.
Okay.
And our goal is to make this, I think one of our vision is to make this a bikeable city, and that feels like an important intermediate step.
I think the vision is the TMP.
Mhm.
That is, and I agree, like Pam had given comment before of like, we don't want a proliferation of other documents. We want a consolidation and like really use these. And I think that is the case, so we would presumably do that in the TMP.
Correct.
And then.
And I will say to your point, I think the vision and the goals on the TMP are outdated.
Oh, yeah.
Safety is not one of them.
Yes, yeah, and that was,
That's an issue, right? So I mean,
yeah.
your point, it should all be under the umbrella of the TMP, right? Like that's our overarching plan that really directs us with what we're doing, and Safer Streets is a component of that.
And then it's probably high level vision of like, protect, like not necessarily protected, but like safe lanes.
Yeah.
And then we get into the tactics when we get down into like street classifications and things like that, presumably, yeah.
A question I have based on what we've done, we identified that also we're gonna be working on a safety action plan at some point to directly address as an element of the TMP. Is that gonna be done before work on the TMP updates take place, or is it gonna work currently or after?
Yeah, I don't know that we've determined exactly when. That'll be part of kind of as we staff kind of, talk about what Safer Streets year 2 looks like. We'll talk about kind of when that takes place. So we had the vision originally to kind of do it concurrently because we thought maybe we could get some grant funding and have the grant funding pay for a good portion of our TMP, if not all of it, but we were told that wasn't really possible. So yeah.
But I think we are thinking about, there is not like funding allocated in 2025 for the TMP update, but what can we start in 2025 to help prepare us for that update, right? Whether it's engagement with you or with the public, or starting to get some of those like data ducks in a row so that when we do start the TMP, like we can really hit the ground running.
Cause we could presumably meet like with us and city, like, feedback sessions and stuff, and get feedback of what people would like to see, what kind of changes we would like to see. Then when 2026 hits, we hand it to the consultants and say, go build this, in essence, like with more feedback presumably and stuff as well. But I think that's a good point. Yeah, that we could be working on it in 2025.
And I guess this would be a question for Tom, but as we look at our 2025 TMB schedule, like the subjects that each meeting is to take place, when do we start scheduling some of that?
Typically, we've not laid out an entire year's plan in advance. We're far too reactionary, I think.
But maybe we could identify some of those as like maybe TMB and TMP study sessions or something like that. To kind of like get something on the book saying, okay, we want to get these ideas hashed out. That way, when the city takes their action, we have already kind of done the discussion, the input.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Derek, and I think we should do that as part of our look ahead, Jeff, don't you think?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the sense of time, I want us to talk about what is TMB's role in this goal.
Yeah, I think that's great. Let's try to get through at least one of these so we know what we're dealing with here. So what is our role in this? And
What is it that you do here?
what can we do? I mean, we're an advisory board, but do we want to develop specific recommendations along each of these goals and objectives?
So I'll throw out what comes to my mind is a few roles. One thing is, what we talked about, Robert was saying, like we all are in our community. We talk to our neighbors. We got holiday parties coming up soon. We'll be having a chance, like soliciting and talking about what is going on, what the city is trying to do. Taking this map, I would love to, if we can get the map more, more updated, like to take it and just say like, here's what the city's shooting for. This is our vision. We're trying to get to this place. And
You are gonna be the hit of the holiday.
I know.
It might be a little too lit.
Bring along.
Talk to our neighbors about, and get that feedback of this is what works and what doesn't, and bring it back into here. So that's my first. The second thought I had is, it's our job is as the city continues to grow and change, to provide feedback on like, you know what, I think we missed a spot. Like whoever said like Southern, like I think we missed a spot. We need to maybe try to fill that area in. We're gonna have a lot of people 20 years from now who live around that mineral station, and they're gonna want to get into the city. We gotta figure that out. Feedback. And then the last one is just as projects are coming up, as opportunities coming up, maintaining, I think we should have our own priority list. Like, we think these are the areas that are the highest priority to hit and to turn into the high comfort lanes first. And they're not always gonna match up with what grant funding might come in, or we have to redevelop this street, and so maybe that's where we go, even though it's not high priority, but at least letting you know what we think our priorities are. So that you can try to manage that in.
And does that roll into the TMP? Those prioritizations, is that where that lives?
The TMP seems like really central to almost all
I
of
think
these
so.
things. It feels huge for us to focus on, yeah.
It is, it is. I think the other part is to try and figure out what some of the other boards are up to, EUA and some of the others, in downtown projects and.
Next
What do you
gen.
do and how is that gonna impact?
And what are their priorities and how does it relate to ours? Yeah.
I think it could be good, like there's, like, it could be good to have one meeting next year. Where like the next gen advisory committee and the downtown and a few of us all get together, and discuss like.
And we've kicked that around, but
Yeah.
it seems like we kind of have come up against obstacles where were we discouraged from doing that? It would seem like I remember that. Certainly we were with planning commission.
You were discouraged?
Yes. Because they're quasi judicial and they didn't want us mixing.
So I think, I mean, they can come here.
Okay.
You guys going there is a different story, is my understanding.
Okay.
What if, we did something like we just did where it's a citizen event where we're doing something, and I've noticed that like some of the council members hold citizen events there. What if it's something in that theme where it's almost like an optional?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Robert, you do your citizen meetings, don't you? Probably twice a year, once a year?
Yeah, twice a year is my goal.
Twice a year?
I've only held one. And those meetings are really dominated by physical infrastructure kind of conversations. And so the last one I did, last couple I've done have really been dominated by what's going on with the lake and Kettering Park and what's going on with Costco.
Mineral.
Maybe that's something we should do. I mean, I should be going to the District 3 ones and whatever, you're in District 3 too.
I went through as well, yeah. I went to Roberts last time, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's something we ought to, and maybe wear our little name tags and emerge from the shadows and say, we're here to solicit ideas and talk about what we're doing on transportation board.
Maybe we could do like a spring event, in the spring of this upcoming year of like multiple committees. And then we have like a round table or something with the committees that community members can come and listen in on. Or something where we chat through like maybe a meet and greet and then a discussion.
Are you thinking about with the public or with other boards?
I think both, like, so a meet and greet, maybe at the beginning where people can just come up and share perspectives, or after, and then we have like a round table, with a couple of the boards to chat through. I mean, that may be challenging, but just,
Boards and commission meet and greet.
Yeah.
You said those words and I just repeated back, didn't I?
Yes.
I apologize.
With like, with like
I always do that well.
what is it called when it's like, there's an MC and there's 5 or 6. Panel, yeah. So like we have a panel, with the boards and commissions and a meet and greet after with snacks or something like that. And then we chat about like, we don't get you all together. What are kind of some common themes that the different boards are all looking at together? Like sustainability is something that should come across all of those different, boards.
I think Robert's head just started hurting.
No, I think, no, sorry, I don't mean to be negative at all. I think the fundamental question is kind of what are things that you guys are thinking about?
Yeah.
Because I think each of the boards and commissions are just thinking about different things.
Yeah.
And, our last study session was with the planning commission, and that was a conversation about the missing middle and really about how lenient we're gonna be around allowing duplexes.
Yeah.
And that's a completely different conversation than you guys are having in here about what you're thinking about. I think if just hearing what other people were thinking about and trying to understand connections between those things is valuable.
And I think like the next gen advisory committee, us and a few, like the art commission, like placemaking is something that is at the heart of a whole bunch of these things. You know, there's kind of like the question for the downtown and which approach do we take for downtown? And there's competing goals, like, is this a thoroughfare? Or is this a place where we're trying to do placemaking? And a thoroughfare is contradictory to placemaking, you know, and all of the, like the arts, you know, commission, if it's like, you know, a street where we have art installations and stuff, and next gen, you know, advisory committee, like these are things that impact all of these different commissions and boards, I think.
Totally. I think Jane and I can reach out to Colleen and figure out logistics, because yeah, I'm trying to remember the whole planning commission discussion. I think there's a way that we can
Okay.
follow with what we're
Yeah.
talking about, totally.
Well, I do think that helps us to, you know, we talked about the need to look at it more as a system and to integrate better things like the art, the future development. What effect is that gonna have on our transportation systems? You know, is it gonna overload the roads? Is it gonna?
True.
I have just a thought, based on what you were talking about. I'm just curious. Should we, I'm pretty sure that the word round robin is sort of like right in my head, like almost like we should be talking, reaching out to the other boards and saying, can we have 20 or 30 minutes on your agenda? And 2 or 3 of us go and we come up with a very short kind of 5 to 6 slide presentation to talk about what we're thinking about.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And invite those other boards to do the same thing on ours. So we dedicate the first 20 or 30 minutes of our meetings.
Yeah.
To have the next gen come. And
Well,
give
why
us
don't
5 or 6
why don't
slides.
you and I take that action?
Well, I guess I'd look around those, like, would everybody be open to filling in on that? And like, you know, 'cause everybody would have to roll.
I think if we did that like January, and then maybe had an event in the spring, you know, when the weather gets a bit nicer, that could kind of be enough time for us to chat with other places.
So what do you think should happen in January, Matt?
Like what Jeff is talking about.
This roundtable kind
Yeah,
of
like
thing?
where we go and chat with other boards and commissions and see what's on their agenda, they see what's on ours, and then we have like the joint meeting potentially in the spring, you know, of.
Well, how many, there are 10 boards?
Oh, geez.
13?
We got rid of a couple.
Okay.
But I really appreciate your perspective. It really is, everybody's thinking about placemaking in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think hearing how people are thinking about that is a really that was a great insight, but I don't remember. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
well, I'm just thinking there's probably several meetings that would have to occur. And I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to get all of that done between.
No, I was thinking more like a 3 or 4 month stretch at
Yeah.
minimum.
So it's arts and culture, environmental stewardship, historical preservation, the next gen, transportation, and South Metro Housing, and the Planning Commission. And then I left out the Appeals and Adjustment Commission.
That'd be some divide and conquer would have to be
Yeah.
required.
Yeah, so,
But even just a email to the chairs saying, this is something I would like to work on, or we would like to propose.
yeah.
And, you know,
Well, why don't you and I take that action to put some meat on the bones of what we would do, because we've talked about this before and I think it does need to happen. And it may start with just an email to those folks and we can get input from other board members on that. But how does what your board do overlay with what we're doing here in transportation? And what is it that we don't know about that we should, or,
yeah,
you know,
and I would, yes, those are the questions you want to answer, and like what kind of we are thinking about coming and visiting you and having that conversation, and
yeah,
we will work with staff to do something later in the spring.
yeah.
So I do want to expand that to one extra point, because we got the involvement with the committees and boards, but we also have our public organizations like the schools, and this might be a really amazing way to involve them into the process. Like, say we get a couple students, we get some of the school leadership to come in to a TMB meeting to talk about the transportation master plan, to talk about their feedback and their goals in a way that involves them as well. And we might have other public organizations that may also have particular feedback that is not normally heard in this type of atmosphere.
So they find out that they've really got an ally.
That's helps us, help the city, help citizens. you know, whatever we need to do, but if we're just focusing on one portion, but these public organizations may all be living in like little islands, the more we can connect all these, the better our answers are gonna be at serving the entire community.
I think that goes back as well to what is the TMB's role? Cause I know like Jim Becklenberg, the city manager's meeting with like the, who is it? Lambert? Is that the?
Todd, yeah.
Todd, yeah, Todd from the LPS, you know, to see like, how are we working together? You know, so I think that's a good question for how are we best? I like the idea of like bridging, you know, different stakeholders, but where does that make most sense?
Yeah, because I,
Name for those, like, didn't we have it plugged in somewhere, like, champions or?
Safety
champions.
Oh, that's a great point, yeah.
So I appreciate that, and I think that's hugely important and does become essential to the education piece.
Good point.
I wonder how, to the point, how much can we take on right now too? Like, should we focus and get ourselves connected into the other boards, you know, and start to get that.
Yeah, that may be step two.
And then,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a great point, and connecting it to the champions was a really great insight, I think.
We don't have to belabor the what is the funding mechanism, I guess, unless we really want to.
Yeah.
I put down grant funding for projects, which is like something we're doing, debt financing, as Robert said before too, something we're looking into to help finance some of this stuff. Through a sales tax. I don't know if there's any other funding mechanisms that you all have been thinking about, because I think that's one of the big things, you know, you bring up is the lack of money, and we can have lots of planning and ideas, but if we don't have money to implement it.
We haven't talked about the TMB bake sale yet. I was gonna save that for later in the.
Maybe we can fund a. Like one piece of it.
So can I ask a question about the sales tax? Is this gonna be a general tax, or is this gonna be specifically to solve transportation problems?
So the 3 sales tax was the one passed in 2021, so this is not new, right? This is the ongoing one. And it was passed with the intention to really start chipping away at our abatements on a lot of our roadways.
And buildings too, right?
And buildings, yes.
But it's general, it's not earmarked for anything specific, it's up to council to decide how you wanna use it.
earmarking and.
Yeah, so it's kind of wide
Is
open.
there possibly a discussion that could be in place about an infrastructure only portion of that would always be there to maintain infrastructure and nothing else?
No, that's, I mean, maintaining, it is infrastructure only. The conversation we have is what proportion of it goes to staff that is planning for infrastructure development, and we've been growing that portion. And I think some of it is going now with, if we do the debt, some of it's gonna go to debt. But, you know, one of the big tensions is the cost of rebuilding our city service center, where we have all of our buildings and public works. And that's just gonna take a huge chunk out of it. That's just not, no one's gonna see that. You know, and I'm, as a city councilman, advocating strongly to invest millions of dollars in Ring Lake. And so infrastructure actually is a really broad topic. But as a council, we've shifted our budget discussions. This year, we've kind of agreed that staff is not gonna grow anymore in the city, and in fact, it might shrink slightly. But that all of our, no, you guys, I know you've heard that. So, that was appropriate. But I think you guys have heard, like, our sales tax have plateaued. They grew really quickly and now it's plateaued. And so our budget conversations right now are solely, almost completely focused on capital. And what are our capital priorities? And we're gonna have a lot of discussion, or we're continuing to have a lot of discussion, which part of our capital is or how much debt are we gonna get, and what are we gonna do with that debt? And I think we're looking right now at 60 million. Does that help?
I think so. It's just a question that I think this is part of the discussion, because
Absolutely.
it's a full circle.
And we are asking for a 3 percentage point increase on marijuana tax. None of it's going to infrastructure. It's homelessness.
And there is a page on the city website, it's 2021 ballot issue 3A that gives kind of an overview.
So, and that's something I think I would just like to task you all to think about is start thinking about some funding mechanisms. Cause I think that's one thing, you know, TMB being a advisory board to council is how can you help advise council on maybe trying to get some of this stuff funded through funding techniques that we're not currently doing. I don't know what they are, but you may.
I don't have more insight than you on how cities fund stuff. So
I was surprised at how much of the Lumen project is being taken back by the developers of it.
Yeah, so the Lumen project agreement is we've agreed to give them $29 million we've agreed that they will give us we're gonna get, it's a 50-50 sales tax split for up to 10 years and $29 million. So I would like to reframe the conversation of, right now that property is not generating any money for the city. So over the next 10 years, we're gonna generate $29 million for the city out of that property. And so we're gonna get $29 million out of that development that we weren't gonna get before. But the justification for why that made sense that from our consultants was essentially, it's really expensive to do redevelopments in developed suburban areas. And if you wanna turn that into a revenue generating development, you have to share more than in prior times. You know, the alternative for the big alternative, as I understand it, for that was warehouses that essentially wouldn't give us any revenue stream and would be a negative flow on. So I'm hoping we can reframe it a little bit as, you know, we're gonna get 29 million out of that we weren't gonna get before.
yeah, and they say that the residents of the city buy stuff at Costco. It's incurred as sales tax, then we give the sales tax back to the development
That's right.
is how that.
So there's no,
Yeah.
right, at this point, there's very little potential for a net loss for the city, like for money to go out the door, like they have to give it to us first.
You're not putting money up front.
There's no money on the table, there's no money up front.
Paid as sales tax revenues come in, every dollar of sales tax is generated at Costco, 50 cents comes to us, 50 cents goes to them.
And it's not technically going to Costco, it's going to the developer.
This one, I meant.
Yeah, and it will be money that comes from all of the businesses there, not just the Costco business.
And the developers are either installing infrastructure that we are requiring them to install or giving us a fee in lieu to add to our projects to build out that infrastructure. All right,
So do we think,
maybe we'll only get the first two, like, are we?
well, no, that's ambitious. I like the way you think. Let's try the next one.
Yeah, and I think these first two are the main two infrastructure ones. The other ones are more of that like educational, programmatic, safety champion. So, you know, we might be able to get through.
Hard stuff, in other words.
Yeah.
So objective 2, improve sidewalks for all citizens, especially for vulnerable users. The objectives under this was improvement in sidewalk condition, gaps, crossings, review and refresh city sidewalk programs. So some of the things we are already doing, we have our miscellaneous concrete projects. So this aligns with our pavement management program. And so, you know, when pavement management comes in, there's different levels of pavement management that I learned a lot about over this last year. So if it's just a mill and overlay or a slurry, there's certain requirements. If it's a full reconstruction, there's other requirements. And that's usually when we trigger ADA. You have to, you know, if you're touching anything as part of the sidewalk network, you have to make sure it's ADA compliant. So whether that's installing directional ramps with tactile warning surfaces, widening sidewalks to be, you know, 4 to 5 feet under ADA. The miscellaneous concrete program does not have a lot of money in it currently, so it really doesn't do much outside of what it triggers through the ADA process on their projects. And then we have the concrete rebate program, which I think we discussed a little bit during the council meeting. And that's, you know, for residents to submit rebates through the city to repair sidewalks. Things that we have already completed, so we have our ADA transition plan. That's the plan that identified $89 million worth of improvements needed throughout the city. And about 4,000 to 5,000, I forget the number, of different ADA points that are non-compliant in the city. We had our CBDG program, that funded sidewalk improvements in low income areas. So that's mainly like the northeastern part of the city. And that program basically was able to fund about a half block of sidewalk per year. And we've now reallocated that money to go towards the Tri-City homelessness program. What is upcoming?
Well, I'll add one thing in there. I just heard it tonight. We're gonna get a map of the pedestrian byways.
Priority quarters.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it. Projects that are in testing right now, that we're visibly seeing impacts in.
Pilot projects you're talking?
Yeah.
Well, I like that a lot. I feel like one of the very first presentations I went to that you made, Shane, around what we learned from the pilot projects around the bikeways was really powerful. And I think providing that information to the public is something that's really important.
I also realized we could have add the Littleton Linkages Trail study, because that did identify a lot of like trail gaps as well.
Yes, it did.
As gaps. So yeah, we have our pilot projects, and then so a couple maps again. These are all of our sidewalks within the city. So in the TMP, we have what's called pedestrian level of traffic stress. So this is a data analysis that takes into account multiple factors, which I should have had.
It seems like a ton of road sidewalks are missing that map. Whole neighborhoods. And I don't mean like Aberdeen, which does not have sidewalks, which makes sense. But like, oh, I guess Mineral, that's Lumen down there, that big block, right? And then we have Heritage is a big gap there as well.
Yeah, like Beaumar South doesn't have any sidewalks. So pedestrian level of traffic stress, so in our TMP, we had a scale of 1 to 4. 1 represents little to no traffic stress. So these are like your really comfortable sidewalks, pathways, right? Off-street trails, really wide sidewalks, places that you want to walk. So, in this, we talk about people with disabilities who use mobility devices, children, older people. You feel safe and comfortable. The 2 category requires a little more attention to the traffic situation. So you want, especially for children, teens, adults, you may want to be a little more aware. But overall, it's in pretty fair condition. LTS 3 and 4 is really where there starts to be more stressful situations, more traffic, you feel uncomfortable. It could be, an attached sidewalk next to a high-speed roadway. It could be, deficient sidewalks that are not wide enough, especially for people with mobility devices. Places that just don't feel comfortable. There's no buffer. You wouldn't choose to walk there if you didn't have to necessarily. So this is all of our sidewalks. These are our level 3 and 4 sidewalks.
Almost the whole city? Yeah. And then we also had a report saying that it would take $80 million in 2019 money to redo our sidewalks for the city.
89 million.
Yeah, so now probably 110 million, 120 million, if not more.
If you spend that kind of money, it also solves the housing problem at the same time, because you just have to sleep on your sidewalk because there's no more money left.
Yes.
Yeah. So, we all know Littleton was built in the mid 20th century. We have a bunch of 2-foot rollover curb sidewalks that are not adequate.
Ours are. My wife walks on the sidewalk, I walk in the road, with our dogs, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, I was just up in Fort Collins at a Safe Routes to School conference and we were walking in downtown Fort Collins and even like a 5-foot sidewalk, which meets ADA compliance, there's 3 of us. Not even all 3 of us can fit, right? That's the triangle that you're walking. Anyways, so this is, you know, both overlaid. So you can see the lighter purple is higher level quality sidewalks, darker purple is not. All of the trails are highlighted as nice quality. All the actual sidewalks are the lower quality. And then this is, the blue is our school routes highlighted. A little harder to see with this, but.
I notice a lot of the sidewalks are leading to the school that are a level 3 and 4.
Yeah.
What, I don't, it doesn't seem like we have a plan, like, based on the current ULUC and all of these things, it doesn't seem like there's a path to improving this right now, you know?
Not comprehensively.
Because what I mean by that is, it seems like from the ULUC and other things that there has to be a development, like Lumen's going in and they're gonna make the area on Mineral really nice because they're a new development. But that's almost the whole city is not that scenario, you know, it's existing houses that will be existing houses for a very long time. And so this is a huge gap, you know, in terms of how are we gonna start tackling this?
Yeah, so I think from staff perspective, and Jay, please feel free to jump in, you know, those ATIP corridor studies that I feel like I keep bringing up and that I really hope we get the funding. We're looking at 9 corridors. A lot of these are collector corridors, our school route corridors. And as part of those corridor studies, you know, we want to look at a holistic vision of what are the mobility options that we can provide, safe, comfortable options along these corridors that we know people who are walking and biking to school, to the grocery store, whatever it is. So while it's planning and not, you know, design and construction, it'll hopefully lead to that. But as part of those, I think it's really looking at like, what is our sidewalk network on these corridors and how can we improve that? And a lot of these situations, you know, Lottie is the first one that will be self-funding and starting, you know, later this year with the right of way, with the land use, which is mostly residential houses. What does it look like? Is it just shared use paths on both sides of those street? Is it a shared use path on one side of the street and just widen sidewalk on one side of the street? Is it protected bike lanes and you're not really touching the side? Like, what does it look like? And I think that's when we're gonna start having those conversations and start looking at it more holistically through that. It's still going to be piecemeal with what corridors we're looking at though.
Yeah.
So to your point, Matt, like it's still not holistic.
I would tell you, implicitly or explicitly, we've prioritized improving bike infrastructure than we have improving sidewalk infrastructure. And I feel like that's the right decision.
I agree.
I mean, I think, is there more funding available? Or, I mean, like, is sidewalk improvement, you know, do you find a lot of grant funding?
Not a ton. I mean, so if we're, you know, thinking kind of our big roadways, right? The big 4 that box in our city. There's lots of funding for those big roadways that are part of the regionally significant network. But once you get into the neighborhoods, that's where there's less funding available. And with federal money, you're required to make those upgrades anyway, because the feds have decided that bike and pedestrian, you know, facilities are a priority, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is we're gonna deal for the most part with what we've got. And we ought to be looking at the incremental improvements that we can make, things like crosswalks. Where does it make a lot of sense to have a crosswalk? Where is there a small connector? I know in our neighborhood, we're looking at having to pay $4,000 to replace, I think just 4, it might be 6 segments of the 5-foot sidewalk that are out. And that's in an HOA community that's gonna, you know, that'll be a shared cost. But it's gonna quickly become prohibitive, you know, to design new things. So I think that what's upcoming is us prioritizing where there are, I guess, high leverage upgrades that will give us better connectivity on those pedestrian paths about town.
I want to build on your HOA thing, and I think that's where the rebate program, if we could reinvigorate that so that HOAs could participate. Because right now they're excluded from the rebate program.
Yeah.
That might get more HOAs to say, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
50-50, let's do this.
It's Frank Azar on our part. We're afraid somebody will sue us for slipping on the sidewalk.
So I will say though, like, our goal is complete streets and safe streets for all. And cars and bikes and not pedestrians is not a safe street for all. You know, there's a lady in my neighborhood that lives right by Josh Stewart's, Liam Stewart's family on that little road. And she walks, like, she has someone walk with her and they walk right in the middle of the street because they can't fit on the, you know, she's like 90, I think, you know, or really old. And she can't, like, there's just nowhere for them to walk. And I think if we could find ways to slow down the traffic, then I
They walk
think,
the streets better.
yeah, like if we lowered our speed limits, then we could justify more saying that we expect that to be more of a shared use with walkers. But with our streets being 25, all of our, or what default 30, you know, for all of our residential streets, that's a complete no-go. It feels like out of the gate, like, you know, Kyle Schlachter has brought up from Littleton Boulevard down to Cayley, there's not a single crosswalk on that road that's like 100 feet wide or whatever it is. I saw someone jaywalk from Lost Coffee over to where the Littleton Brewery is going in today. Because, like, do we really expect people to walk, you know, quarter mile down, quarter mile back and come back? I mean, there's all these issues, I feel like. And so I think we could potentially address it with others. But and we have finite funds and finite resources, and we have to prioritize, but it should be safe streets for all.
So that's identifying the high priority
Areas.
crossing areas that or upgrades required.
Is a crosswalk considered the same category as this?
I would think so.
It's not a sidewalk technically.
It's
but-
effectively connecting sidewalk to sidewalk.
Yeah, pedestrian network, I think is,
Yeah.
So maybe we say improve pedestrian networks for, or sidewalks specifically, but yeah.
And is this an opportunity to throw in the raised sidewalk,
Yeah.
even though they cost more?
Well, doesn't this all ultimately tie into what would ultimately be a connectivity plan that identifies, and kind of ranks which things need to be improved in a way that we can plan for long term?
Well, that's, I mean, as we think about this, we have our map of pedestrian networks.
Yep.
I assume that the safe routes to school networks will all be part of that as well. And then to your point, we were saying like, these are like, our priorities are to focus on these
Yeah.
networks. And, you know, from some very specific high traffic, high issue areas, like some crosswalks. But I think another part of it is probably gonna have to be at some point having city council or somebody saying like, we're any given year, 5%, 10% of our infrastructure budget is going to go towards pedestrian and sidewalks.
It seems like that's required.
I don't know what the right number is. I'm throwing 5 to 10 out. I don't know if that's too high.
Is that the right thing, or is it, or should we be in the position of arguing and saying, this is the number that makes sense, this is why, rather than, I'm not a fan of fixed percentages to things. I think we ought to approach it on, here's what we need, you know, and these things meet the hurdle for why they ought to have a capital investment.
Yeah, if we have the ATIP funding and we can do the corridor and we can look at it from a bike and pedestrian and car perspective, all like, you know, knowing that cars are riding with it, but looking at it from that whole perspective, then we could say, if we got these 4 intersections done really well, then pedestrians can get most places,
Yeah,
something like that.
You have essentially completed the network. But it might be more, it might be less, but I think we ought to, because those different modalities are gonna all be competing for the same pot of money.
I agree.
And so I think rather than setting a percentage, I think we ought to participate in saying, this is why this year we think you should invest more in pedestrian, or this year more in bike, or
Yeah, that's TMB's role there, I think, is recommendations, yeah.
that's our role to council. Right?
Advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the arts board is recommending what percentage of our capital infrastructure should go to art.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as a, I mean, that's
Just is.
how, that's what's going on.
That's why we're gonna take him on in an arm wrestling.
Cage match with the arts commission would be pretty funny.
And the one thing I do wanna mention about sidewalks, and this is something that I'm maybe interested in having TNB look a little more into, is what other funding mechanisms are there, so. Denver, and Shane is a Denver homeowner, so he can speak to this, passed it last year to start. I guess it's a fee,
It's a
right?
fee,
So
yeah.
Do you feel overtaxed, Shane?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's $150 a year, so it's not bad.
Okay.
And I can't remember exactly how much they're biting off at a time, but they're small chunks. And the idea is to get these residential streets that aren't, part of big grant projects, big construction projects, because otherwise they would just they'd never be dealt with until, unless there's damage to the sidewalk, and that's technically the homeowner's responsibility. And so even though I don't want to shell out another $150, I'd rather do that than,
I think that's money that goes a long way, I think a lot of people are happy about that.
There's something
Inglewood
we
has a
need
fee
to
too.
consider specifically on this, and this is like very much to Dave's point, is a lot of the HOAs have a bit of autonomy of responsibility for some of these sidewalks, but they're still in the same condition. There needs to be a way to have a discussion about, okay, what about these things the city doesn't have direct influence over? How do we get those up to speed for all citizens? Because if we say have a sidewalk fee, it's gonna improve the things the city has full autonomy over. But if the city doesn't have autonomy over, say, like a certain HOA sidewalk, they can't come in and bully them and just go upgrade something. There is a much bigger discussion at that.
Isn't that what code enforcement does?
It can, but it all depends on what the agreements and the ownership of each of the sidewalks per each HOA, and I can tell you, each one's gonna be different too.
Well, mine would be classic, I guess, to a certain extent. So on one side, the sidewalk is Littleton Boulevard, the south side of Littleton Boulevard, right?
Yeah.
Who's got that? Mostly the city. Because there's a bus stop there and there's all kinds of stuff going on right there. But the south side is Lily. And that's one of those little 2-footers, and it's actually on a slope, and the trees are making it go all wonky. So, okay. How do you, and that's why, we get a little help, and there you go.
And maybe like, we were talking about the program, like, maybe there could be something where there's like a cost participation of an HOA that wants to like optionally buy into the sidewalk improvement, but they can also put some of their responsibility in. But it's gonna be a discussion that would have to be done with each one, and I don't know if the city would go to them or they would come to the city at that point.
I mean, like, shovel, right?
I
All that is on us.
I think a huge part of this is that single-family homes don't create the tax base to even maintain the infrastructure that they're built on. And we have a city that's 80% single-family homes, and the tiny 4 corridors of potential tax base, to actually build it. And we're just finding that it's like a Ponzi scheme where we build the subdivision, we get an influx of money, and then 40 years down the road, the maintenance comes due, and there isn't the money in the funds to do it, and this is the whole book, Strong Towns, is about this exact thing of how do you make a strong town financially? And
To give you a fun little thing, Shane putting $150 by the dictate of Denver towards that's actually as much as some of the HOAs charge in fees to maintain all of their infrastructure.
yes. Just
A month. Yeah.
But even then, it's like, there's some of the amounts which the problems are not being solved by, each of the key parts and pieces of the city, because the city will always have responsibility of what they do, but the ones that they don't, the city can't make them go do what the city sees as the right thing.
Aberdeen does not have sidewalks, and the city cannot make them have sidewalks.
Go more so.
All right, well, we are at the end of our meeting tonight, folks, and as much as I'd like for this to go on forever, it just wouldn't be fair to the rest of you.
I was trying to pull up community development's doing a neighborhood housing initiative. I just encourage you all to look into that, and they had a survey open. I think it might be closed now.
Yeah, just close, but if you're on an HOA, we're really thinking about changing restrictions on what can be built on single-family lots. Essentially, the current proposal is that duplexes anywhere on a single-family lot can be built. And the question is also about triplexes and multiplexes. So
I would have loved to have built a duplex instead of a single family home when I built.
so there's, and the council's divided, but it's obviously not an immediate change to the landscape. It's creating a potential for a slow change. But I think that's gonna be a big change.
Does it not make sense to do that, maybe section by section or incrementally, rather than, citywide? See how
That is the conversation that we're having.
I see.
And the council is divided.
Gotcha.
And so I'm encouraging you to engage.
The feedback tool is very challenging, I feel.
Well, and I think it's closed. The survey, I think, is closed. I think it literally closed
It
on.
was like going into the ULUC code things.
Oh, you're talking about feedback on the
Inside of
change.
that.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
not simple.
But there'll be, that's gonna be
Good heads up.
I have something.
All right, it's a good one. I guess
We'll
Talk through all
the
six. We
next
got through
four.
yeah,
Next meeting, so.
Are we adjourned?
we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
So.
And so,